I think to answer your question, I think it's a bit early yet. He's been in office 6 months, and these problems have been a long time in the works, and it would be unrealistic for them to be solved immediately. So I think a better time to judge whether Mr. Trump is up to the job in foreign policy terms is probably after 12 months. But the signs are certainly not promising at the moment.
Do you think he can last his term?
Well, that depends, of course, on a lot of things, not least the investigation now being headed into by Mr. Mueller into the whole question of the possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. That looks very serious, by the way. Many American newspapers describe it as more serious than Watergate, which eventually brought down Mr. Nixon.
Yeah, we've had a few chats about that. But, Robert, to what extent do we take notice of what is being said? Because that is the huge inconsistency here. And also, as Brodie mentioned, Qatar hosts 10,000 American troops at the biggest US military base in the Middle East. So they are in bed together in one sense.
Yep.
And does Qatar probably take all this with a grain of salt?
I think Qatar, at the moment, is feeling a bit besieged. After all, it's on the receiving end of punishing economic and diplomatic measures taken by the other Gulf states. And if this persists, it could destabilise the region. One of the things that's difficult to disentangle here is how justified is this action being taken against Qatar? And the claim is that they're backing high-level terrorism, a charge that Mr. Trump has made. But there are counter-arguments that Saudi Arabia, for example, has also backed quite radical forces, not least in the Syrian civil war.
Yes, exactly. Robert, thank you very much for joining us. Professor Robert Patman on the panel on a Friday. See, we've done quite a lot of thinking for a Friday. And one more thing to think about before you go. In Gore, the question of parking meters comes up regularly. And a while back, the town brought back old-style single-head parking meters to replace the multi-bay ones because they were hard to maintain. And even single-head meters cost $100,000 each.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
That's a lot for a parking meter. So now there's the question of whether Gore's parking meters need to go, and the suggestion that they do has come from social media following a heartfelt plea from Gore District Councillor and retailer Doug Grant for people to shop in town to save local business. And the Mayor's open to the idea of having a talk about it. If councils gave away the revenue from parking meters in small towns and in the suburbs of big towns to encourage people into shopping centres, would that be a great idea?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here wondering how much revenue parking generates for the Gore District Council.
Well, you'd need to claw back 100K from each metre.
Yeah, that's
before
true.
you started making any revenue, wouldn't you?
Before to get to zero.
Yeah, to get to zero.
I think it's one of those things when I think it's a great idea. It's just so not that I hate to be Auckland's focus here, but when would that ever be the case? Like, they probably make their money in about a couple of days up here.
Isn't it lovely in Auckland being in a place where you don't have to put money in a parking lot?
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. But I also love the fact that there are still places that have the old school one. It's only 50 cents, isn't it? Or $2. Come up here, Gore, see how it goes. I know.
Chris Weekharter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you back on the panel and have a nice weekend on this very sporting weekend. And Brodie Kane, thank you for coming in too.
Thank you.
Thanks for your company, everybody. We are back with the panel on Monday and standing by now for Checkpoints with Rowan Quinn today.
No mai, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint, I'm Rowan Quinn. Tonight we're back in London where Scotland Yard has launched a criminal investigation into the fire at Grenfell Towers. Some harrowing stories are emerging from residents stranded in their apartments. Some of them are now presumed dead. The brother of the first victim to be named describes how they became separated in the chaos on the stairwell. And there's been a huge response to the story of a 61-year-old hip replacement patient, Maureen, who's been recuperating in a house bus in Northland because she can't afford to go anywhere else. But her GP tells us Maureen's case is just the tip of the iceberg. Plus, we look ahead to the Lions, the All Blacks and the America's Cup. That's all coming up after the news with Katrina Batten.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The Corrections Union says if prison guards had pepper spray, they wouldn't have to physically subdue prisoners. It comes as 3 guards appear in court facing charges for using excessive force during an attack at Auckland Prison last month. Tom Furley reports.
3 prisoners faced charges after a guard was attacked and stabbed multiple times last month. 3 guards also face allegations of excessive force while stepping in, with 2 appearing in court today on charges of assault and a 3rd facing a charge of attempting to pervert the course of justice by turning a CCTV camera away. They deny the charges in the North Shore District Court and were granted name suppression for their own safety. The head of the Corrections Association, Alan Whitley, says staff have only physical force to subdue prisoners. If they had pepper spray, which will be in place in a few months, he says the incident could have been stopped.
Theresa May has ordered a full public inquiry into the devastating fire in Grenfell Tower in West London as the death toll continues to rise. Mrs May says she heard heartbreaking stories of the people who were caught up in the tragedy, and the victims and their families deserve a full investigation. 17 people have been confirmed dead, but that number is expected to rise. The BBC's Angus Crawford is close to the scene in West London.
Smoke still rises from the tower, which is now a blackened shell. Chunks of cladding and window frames hang from its sides, blown about by the wind. Fire crews are continuing to damp down areas of the building when flames flare again. Parts of the block are too unsafe for teams to enter, so specialist search dogs are to be sent in first to try and locate the dead. Only when it's considered safe will police forensic teams be able to begin a fingertip examination of every flat. The London Fire Commissioner Danny Cotton said it could take weeks to complete the search.
Angus Crawford. Scotland Yard has opened a criminal investigation. A Whangarei woman forced to live in a leaky bus as she recovered from surgery is now safe and warm in a local motel arranged by her MP with work and income paying. Maureen had a hip replacement 2 weeks ago and hasn't been able to find an affordable flat since she moved to Whangarei. An old bus she's been living in is cold and damp, and she's had to move painfully between the bus and a house to use the bathroom and kitchen. RNZ has been flooded with offers of help for the 61-year-old since broadcasting her story this morning. Te Tai Tokerau MP Kelvin Davis has arranged for Maureen to move into a local motel paid for by work and income for at least a week. His staff are investigating whether she's getting all her benefit entitlements and have had an offer of a studio unit for her from a local councillor. A building lobby group is warning the system for setting construction standards is deeply flawed and puts the public at risk. It comes as the fatal London high-rise fire focuses attention on building standards. Graham Berg of the Specialist Trade Contractors Federation has written demanding change to the Building Minister Nick Smith and Commerce Minister Jackie Dean. He says standards are user pays, so the process is becoming slanted towards those able to fund their development. Where the money can't be found, he says some standards are being lost entirely. Mr Burke says in his industry, which is scaffolding, one entire standard on testing out of a suite of 6 recently dropped out due to a lack of funding. Mountain recreation groups have launched a campaign to turn high country land near Queenstown into the Remarkables National Park. The proposed park would span a vast area across Otago Southland and would include the Remarkables mountain range and the watersheds of several rivers. The move would give the land special protection under the National Park Act, and it would get extra funding to keep it pest and predator free. The president of the Federated Mountain Clubs, Peter Wilson, says the move would be beneficial for locals, tourists and the area's ecosystem.
A national park proposal comes with better management. It unites all of the land in that area under one cohesive management framework in terms of some of the threats that the area faces, such as pests, wilding pines. We certainly think the case can be made to getting better funding for that area.
Peter Wilson from the Federated Mountains Club. The bomb squad is on its way to Dunedin to dispose of a suspicious package found taped to a vacant building. Inspector Jason Guthrie says the small foil-covered package and an attached note were discovered by a member of the public on a building in Moray Place in the central city about lunchtime. He says about 5 buildings and a Countdown supermarket have been evacuated as a precaution, and a 100-metre radius cordon is in place.
The New Zealand Defence Force Explosive Ordnance Team have been notified, and they are on their way to Dunedin, and we expect that they will arrive hopefully within the next hour. Police understand that this has caused inconvenience to a number of people, but hope to have the issue resolved as soon as possible, and we appreciate people's patience with this.
Inspector Guthrie says the police don't know the identity of the person who left the package. It's 5:05. To sport, and Manu Samoa winger Tim Nanai-Williams says his teammates won't be intimidated playing the All Blacks in their Eden Park fortress tonight. The two sides have only met 6 times. The first was at Eden Park in 1993. The All Blacks are unbeaten in 37 games at the Auckland ground. Nanai-Williams says most of the players know each other from Super Rugby, and Manu Samoa is concentrating on its own game, not the opposition.
They've got 2 arms, 2 legs, and we're just going to go out there and just play our brand of rugby. That's all we've been doing this whole week, is just focusing on ourselves. And we know that they're real good players around the whole board, and we really want to just execute as well as we can and do what we can do best in our team.
Tim Nanai-Williams. Meanwhile, the All Blacks lock Sam Whitelock says the All Black forwards need to establish early dominance, something they struggled with when the two sides last met in Apia 2 years ago.
Really tried to overload the forward area and got the big guys running. They were very direct, so that's something that both Brodie and I have to be aware of and make sure that we front.
Sam Whitelock in the early game at Eden Park at 5:30. Tonga plays Wales. And there are reports in France that unwanted All Black centre Malakai Fekitoa has been offered a 2-year contract by Toulon. American Ricky Fowler has shot a record equalling 7 under par 65 to grab a 1-shot lead after the first round of the US Open golf tournament in Wisconsin. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Karen Clark on dream weaving, which is another way of saying making fabulous fabrics in time for Matariki. Country Life celebrates the poplar tree, which turns out to be not so popular with some rural folk, but one farmer wants to change all that. We have a musical mixtape from musical everyman, Lawton Cora, and there's a sonic tonic dedicated to friendship, because that's what Nights is for, with me, Brian Crump, from After the News at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui and Taupo. Cloudy periods and a few showers clearing from Auckland southwards tonight. Areas of morning fog tomorrow. Bay of Plenty also Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington. Mostly fine. Areas of morning cloud or fog tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, a few showers mainly near the coast. Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, cloudy areas today, fine tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, fine spells, isolated showers about the coast today. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mainly fine, but a few showers about Fiordland and the south coast, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint. And we begin tonight back in London, where Scotland Yard has launched a criminal investigation into the fatal fire at Grenfell Tower, which has claimed at least 17 lives and left an unknown number presumed dead. Authorities say it's still unsafe for firefighters to reach parts of the 24-storey building, and structural engineers and the fire service are working together to shore up areas of the burnt-out hulk so the building can be searched meticulously for bodies. It comes as harrowing stories emerge of those who are trapped and are unable to escape, and fears the death toll could reach triple figures. Bridget Burke reports.
And I looked behind me, I didn't see my brother. I said, my brother, where is he? They were ignoring downstairs. Then I went outside. I called him, he said, where are you? He said, I'm in the... I said, where are you? He said, I'm in the flat. I said, why you didn't come? They brought us outside. I thought you are with us. He said, no one brought me outside. He said, why you left me? He said, why? I didn't leave. I said they took him outside with me. They didn't. They left him.
Omar Al-Hajali describing his final heartbreaking conversation with his brother Mohammed early on Wednesday morning. The Syrian refugees shared a 14th floor flat in the Grenfell Tower block, but became separated in the stairwell as fire engulfed the 24-storey apartment block. The engineering student returned to his flat where he remained trapped for 2 hours, calling friends and family in Syria.
He said, please tell Mum to pray for me, and he was telling me to put Quran for him. He said, are you happy with me? Are you happy about me? Do you have any problem with me? I said, no, who has a problem with you? You have the sweetheart, Muhammad. You will make it out.
The 25-year-old is the first of 17 confirmed victims of the fire, but as many as 600 residents occupied the 120 apartments in the tower. Surrounded by extended family, Mohammed Hakim fears he has lost his mother, father, 2 brothers and sister who lived on the 17th floor.
Not losing one member of my family, but losing all 5, the whole entire family. I don't have my parents anymore, and you only get one set of parents in this world, and I had 3 siblings. They're all gone in the space of a couple of hours after leaving their house. They're all gone. And no one wants to give us any information about where their whereabouts are, if they're still within the building or not.
Mohammed's cousin Abdul Rahim says his family stood helplessly outside on the street as the inferno raged.
This is the worst thing I will remember in my life. I saw my uncle from the 17th floor. He opened the window and he kept shouting, please help us, get us out. And he was saying Allah's name and all this. And I kept looking at his helpless.
Another cousin, Rahima Khanum, says she spoke to her aunt as the fire took over.
She was like, oh, we're not going to make it, we can't make it, we can see flames under the door. I can see flames under the door. And I kept saying, try and put things under the door to stop the smoke coming in and get low as you can and open the windows. Someone's going to come, call the fire brigade, do something. And then she stopped talking. And all I could hear was this crackling noise in the background because the phone was still on, but she wasn't saying anything. And not knowing is killing me. I really need to find out where they are.
As the numbers of confirmed missing and dead continue to grow, families and friends canvassed the streets with posters searching for loved ones. Carleen Reid and Natasha Green are looking for their friend Jessica.
Jessica's a 12-year-old vibrant young girl who's going to be turning 13 next month. She's a lovely little girl with a bubbly personality, and we're just worried and concerned about her. We just want her home. We want her back now. The family do as well.
People have lost their lives because the corners were cut, because of cheap decoration that didn't even need to be there. It's not fair. It's not fair, and the authorities don't care. They're not sending. They're not even asked. We were just saying, funnily enough, they're quick to call you when they want our rent paid and things like that, but they cannot call to check if we're okay.
As smoke continues to waft from the blackened shell of the social housing block, specialist fire crews and dog teams face hazardous conditions, scouring the wreck for bodies. And grief is turning into anger. Labour councillor Benazir Lashari knew most of the building's residents.
The material they used, it was burning on the outside. It was burning on the outside up. It wasn't the inside, it was the outside up. It was that material. It was cheap, flammable material.
Community organiser Pilgrim Tucker, who had worked closely with the residents, saw the blaze as the tragic consequence of long-term neglect of an entire section of the community.
There's been a lot of regeneration. The land here is incredibly valuable. It's one of the most wealthy areas. It's one of the most high-demand housing areas anywhere in the country, I would think. And I think these tenants are well aware that that's how they're seen. The assets are more important than them. Property is more important than their lives.
Prime Minister Theresa May visited Grenfell Tower today, but was criticised for only speaking to firefighters and not surviving residents. In contrast, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn was cheered after visiting a nearby church, meeting displaced residents and volunteers. London's Mayor Sadiq Khan himself heckled by residents during a visit to the scene.
Understandably, the residents are very angry and concerned and have genuine questions that demand answers. And so, whereas
someone needs to be held accountable.
Where, of course,
These deaths could have been prevented.
Where, of course, we welcome the call from the Prime Minister to have an independent public inquiry. We need answers now.
Now.
And that's why I'm calling on the Prime Minister.
Not 2 years from now. We need it now.
And that's why I'm calling on the judge who conducts the inquiry to make sure there's an interim response this summer. We can't afford to wait a number of years, either for the inquiry or for the inquest, and that's why it's important there's a response this summer. It's also important that the checks I asked the government to do yesterday in relation to other tower blocks across London, but also across the country, need to be undertaken as soon as possible.
Scotland Yard has launched a criminal investigation into the fire, and Jeremy Corbyn has suggested vacant houses in Kensington and Chelsea be requisitioned on behalf of those left homeless by the fire. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
A GP says Northland is in the midst of a housing crisis, exacerbated by Aucklanders heading north to escape big rents. It comes after revelations a 61-year-old woman has been forced to recuperate from a hip replacement in a cold, damp bus because she can't afford to go anywhere else. But Maureen's doctor, Kyle Eggleton, who works for a whangarei Māori health service, says her case is just the tip of the iceberg. He says he's seeing homeless families every week and cites one family of 15 sharing a lounge. He says the situation's damaging mental and physical health in the north. We'll speak with him in a moment, but first here's Lois Williams with Maureen's story.
How cold does it get in here? It's freezing. I have to wear this. I've got a balaclava as well, but it's in the wash right now. A scarf? Yeah, I have this like this. Around your head? Yep. Yeah. Because the cold, it's just... I can't even put my hands outside the blanket, just my hands sometimes. And I won't use a heater because people are struggling with money and you do your best to not use power.
Maureen is 61 and 2 weeks ago she had major surgery, a long-awaited hip replacement, and she's living in an old bus in a friend's backyard. She's in a lot of pain, the bus is cold and damp, and she has to stagger up and down steps to use the bathroom and kitchen in the house.
I pay $50 for the bus and $50 for the house, or the use of the house, because I've got to use the shower, toilet, cooking, and that's it.
How do you find it getting up the steps to the bus and into the house with your hip?
It's just a case of having to. I don't have a choice right now. It's awkward. Getting in and out of bed is awkward because it's too low. My beds are supposed to be, everything's supposed to be a bit higher than my knee till I get better. But I have a little bucket that I pee in at night time, so I don't have to go out in the cold, and then I go sterilise it every day. You'll see it sitting out on the tap out there.
Maureen's grateful she's got the bus, but it's not where she thought she'd be at 61. She's lived and worked overseas and in Auckland, driving trucks. But in 2014, the company folded and she lost her job. And then her hip packed it in and she came to whangarei in the hope of finding affordable housing.
I would never have dreamt that this is where I'd be in my life at this age, but however, it is the way it is, and I don't know what to do because I can't get a place. I got a shock to see how high the rents were and how hard it was to even get a place. So I'll be starting from scratch when I get better, but it's only time to see whether I'm got better or not. I think I am on the mends. I'm not as fragile as I was. Well, I am, but that's just because I'm healing, I think, yeah. I hope.
Maureen says her goal is to get back to work and find a one-bedroom flat. But for now, it's a bus in a backyard in winter.
And that's Lois Williams reporting there. Well, Dr Kyle Eggleton is Maureen's GP and he says the situation's at crisis point. I spoke with him this afternoon and asked him if Maureen's situation had changed.
The manager of Ministry of Social Development in Whangarei has contacted me and offered his assistance to trying to get a place for Maureen. And Calvin Davis, the local MP for Taitokoro, has also contacted Maureen as well to see what he can assist her with. And in terms of the ministry, what did they give any suggestion of the kind of help that they might be able to give? No, they didn't give me any indication about what sort of help they could offer, but I would imagine it would be looking at a Housing New Zealand house for Maureen. Have you spoken to Maureen since those offers of help have come in? Yes, I have. I rang Maureen and she was in tears, really delighted that people are trying to assist her and help her. How widespread is this issue in Northland? Look, this is something I see on a daily basis, and the rest of my team at Kura Ngāti Wai see on a daily basis as well. So today I saw a person who's crippled with pain, living in a home which is got multiple flights of steps up to her front yard, and she's really trying to get a more suitable kind of place to live in. I've got people who are living in lounge, just the whole whānau living in a lounge, 15 people, and they don't need any heating because they're heating each other up. Another family just last week told me that there's 12 in their home, and there's not enough space for them all, so some of the parents are living out in the backyard in a tent. And this is just something that's just every day we see people who are in horrible situation as far as their housing goes.
You know, and it's great news for Maureen that this help's come in for her, but, you know, where's the help for all these other people?
That's right. I mean, I spend a lot of my time writing letters to go to Housing New Zealand, trying to advocate on behalf of people. Great that Maureen's possibly going to get something, but there's hundreds of people out there who are in just similar dire circumstances.
You know, what's happening that's causing this from what you can see?
Well, I think it's multifactorial. So, there's the issue of housing affordability or unaffordability. Rents are high. We've got housing pressure in Northland. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of kind of rental homes around, and the Housing New Zealand stock is limited as well. I read recently that there's over 20 houses in Whangarei who Housing New Zealand homes which are empty because of methamphetamine contamination. We've got people moving up from Auckland and people moving across from Australia trying to come back home because of kind of economic issues and really struggling to get a house. So there's lots of issues going on that causes homelessness and relative homelessness. Overcrowding.
Well, sorry, Kyle. Would you call this a crisis?
I think it's a crisis. Certainly, I haven't experienced anything like this for some time. I'm just noticing in the last year that there's kind of more and more of a problem.
Yeah, so it's something that's happened in the last year because of all those factors you're talking about there. Can you think of what could be? Have you got any thoughts of what could be done to help to sort of alleviate this problem?
Well, I think it comes back to the root causes of addressing socioeconomic disadvantage. What can we do about alleviating poverty? And that really sits at a policy and government level. That's where I think that the root causes lie. As far as what we can do, well, obviously we can try and improve our housing stock. We can increase the number of houses that we're social housing that we can offer. There's other things that can help. We can look at our accommodation allowance that we give people, make sure it's appropriate. I had a patient 2 days ago who told me that all he's got at the end of the day for spending is about $50 because the rest of it goes on his rent. And how can you live on $50 a week?
Yeah, and when you're seeing all these cases, how does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel really angry, really. We've got, this has been a crisis that's been brewing and people have been talking about for a long time, and we've had a government that's kind of hasn't paid much attention to it or any action is really being placed on it. So, yeah, it makes me angry. All the ministers really need to look at what their responsibilities are and how they can go about improving things. So, I'd say to all of them, look really carefully at what you're doing to our community and our society, because it's not working at the moment for many of our people.
That's GP Kyle Eagleton. And a short time ago we heard that Maureen will spend the weekend at a Whangarei motel and Wins will assess her situation on Monday. Well, coming up, Rotorua welcomes the Lions, Lord releases her second album, and it's a green light for the Hundavasa Arts Centre. And we'd love your feedback, particularly on the Northland housing crisis and Maureen's situation. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And you can watch us online on Facebook Live at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, on Freeview Channel 50 and on Face TV, Sky Channel 83. The country's public health boss has apologised for an error in allocating millions of dollars worth of funding in this year's budget. The Ministry of Health says an internal error meant that draft figures were formally submitted for budget funding allocations for DHBs rather than final figures. It says the difference between the draft and final figures amounts to $38 million, which has been correctly redistributed amongst DHBs. The Director-General of Health, Chai Chuai, has apologised and independent auditors have been brought in to establish how it happened. An expense Health Minister Jonathan Coleman says taxpayers will have to absorb. Dr Coleman says such a mistake is unacceptable.
The Ministry has made an error in the allocation of the $439 million across the 20 district health boards. So they've given some more than they should have had and some less. And that error needs to be corrected. I've made it very clear to the Director General of Health that this is unacceptable. Ministers need to have total confidence in the figures that they're supplied with. I mean, in the bigger picture, it's a fraction of 1% of the total vote, and it doesn't change the total amount of money district health boards as a group get. But it is frustrating that they didn't get figures right, and ministers rely on officials to do this stuff properly and to give the correct information, and that has not happened in this case, and that's unacceptable.
So you're pretty annoyed about this, obviously. What's got to you the most?
Well, you know, the ministry does a lot of very good work, and the bigger picture is we're really delivering in health. You know, we're producing more operations, more appointments, more of every type of service, and this undermines that good work. So that is irritating.
Is it embarrassing for you?
Well, it's not personally embarrassing for me. I think it's very embarrassing for the officials.
Although you are the Minister of Health, does the buck not stop with you?
Well, it depends how you want to cut that. But in the end, officials have not done their job properly, and they've owned up to that.
And what will the consequences be for the Director-General of Health?
Oh, look, I don't think it's going to be helpful to have any change in that position. I mean, you know, the Director-General of Health actually does an excellent job in general, and it's his team which has not done this work properly. But, I mean, if you look at the gains we've made overall, I mean, an extra 50,000 operations a year, 150,000 appointments, nearly 7,000 extra doctors and nurses, and more of every type of service. The big picture is excellent. But it is irritating when you get this type of technical error and it ends up with a string of media interviews and the work having to be redone, and it undermines confidence in the Ministry of Health.
What's the biggest discrepancy here for individual DHBs?
We can supply you with the figures, but there were 6 DHBs that got less than they should have and 14 that got more.
And what sort of figures are we talking?
Well, cumulatively it's 38 million, but for most DHBs it's 1 or 2 million.
So what about the biggest one? Are we talking any, 6, 7 million?
Oh, yeah, there are some that are bigger than that. Look, we're quite happy. I'll get my office to supply the figures too.
So you're letting communities down, really, aren't you? Who in the budget, you're letting individual communities around the country down who thought they were getting so much of a health spend in the budget?
No, I wouldn't frame it like that. I mean, in the end, there's a big chunk of money for district health boards, $439 million. It's the way that's cut up. But, you can't say that. I mean, we're actually producing more of every type of service across the country. But this is an annoying technical error, and I've told the health officials that there's no way this can happen again.
And what will that Deloitte's report cost?
Look, that is something the Director General has ordered. You'll have to ask him about that.
But taxpayers picking up the bill for that, I guess.
Who else do you think would?
Is that acceptable?
Well, I think they've got to make sure that the processes are done correctly in future, and this is the consequence of an error that's been made.
And that's the Minister of Health, Jonathan Coleman there. Well, the Māori All Blacks have another opportunity to etch their names in rugby fame when they host the British and Irish Lions in Rotorua tomorrow night. While the town itself is expecting a bumper weekend, the Māori get the chance to repeat their historic 2005 win over the Lions and send off long-serving loose forward Liam Messam, with the hometown hero playing his last game for the Māori in front of whānau and friends. Our rugby reporter Joe Porter's in Rotorua.
The Māori All Blacks being welcomed in true Rotorua style, but it's not just the Māori who are being greeted with open arms. These two Lions fans couldn't find a place to stay for the game before some warm-hearted locals stepped up.
Really last minute for this. Yesterday, in fact, we found a place to stay just this weekend. So, yeah, really last minute. Everyone's really willing to have us. Yeah,
really hospitable so far.
And so do you meet your Rotorua hosts tonight, is it?
Probably Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah.
We're going to pop there and,
The
yeah.
big moment, the big reveal.
Yeah, the big reveal, yeah. Hopefully they're really nice because everyone seems really nice so far. So
fantastic so far.
Do you know anything about the people and where you're staying?
We know it's about half an hour walk to the stadium, and that is all we know, yeah.
Fantastic. So it could be paradise or it could be hell.
Absolutely, but yeah, we're willing to take that risk.
They're less confident about their team's chances against the mighty Māori.
Obviously, since God, it's crazy. Damien McKenzie, Milner Scudder, that's class. So yeah, I completely forgot about someone like Liam Messam, so that's just got a bit harder.
Yeah. I think on any given day, any of these players could easily play for the All Blacks. So if they play at the top of the game on Saturday, then we could get a massive hiding.
Hiding or not, the boys will be out on Saturday night, and Reg from Hennessy's Irish Bar says they're ready for the thirsty Lions fans.
We increased the size of the pub by 3. We've got a marquee out the back that's going to take about 500, and we opened our function room as well, which takes 150. Well, a bit over 1,000, I'd say, 1,200, somewhere around there.
You think you'd be in danger of running dry?
Never. In 2005, we were the first pub in New Zealand. On the day of the game, we actually sold 88 kegs of Guinness, and we've had Ireland here, we've had the World Cup. We know what to expect, and it's going to be fantastic.
And locals are equally confident the tourists will spend up large.
Yeah, especially with those Irish fellas, eh? Yeah. The bars will make a killing, I reckon.
And not just the bars, with the local barber cutting fresh fades for the Māori All Blacks and old friend Liam Messam saying the Māori will get the job done.
Smashed him, big. Smashed him.
Got to do it for Liam, eh?
Yeah, straight up, mate. Straight up.
Travelling Lions fan Trevor says so far the tour has been fantastic in all but one respect.
Everything's been spot on apart from the rugby. Yeah, it appears that New Zealand's a very nice country and the people are really friendly, and that, apart from the ones who wear studs.
Trevor and his crew are staying at the same hotel as the Māori All Blacks, and they're hatching a devious plan.
That's right. We've been told that we've got to stay up all night and to sabotage and make sure that they get no rest so that they're real blary-eyed and that they don't pass it too accurately.
However, young Māori fans out enjoying Ripper rugby on a glorious Rotorua day reckon hometown hero Messam will go out with a bang. Who do you think's going to win? And who's your favourite player?
Liam Messam. 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 Liam Messam.
100-0 to the Māori.
1,074 no.
With Tau Toko like that, it's hard to see how he won't. In Rotorua for Checkpoint, ko Joe Porta Tene.
Coming up, Team New Zealand's upbeat about its rematch against old foe Oracle. The father of an American college student released from North Korea says his son was brutalised and terrorised by the regime. And a taxi driver explains how he used a police car to pick up an MP from Dunedin Airport last night. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The Corrections Union says prison guards need to have pepper spray so they don't have to physically subdue prisoners. 3 prisoners face charges after a guard was stabbed multiple times in Auckland prison last month. 3 guards are also facing charges of using excessive force while stepping in, with 2 appearing in court today on charges of assault. The British Prime Minister Theresa May has ordered a public inquiry into the deadly fire in Grenfell Tower in West London. 17 people are now confirmed dead, but many more are missing, and the police say they may never identify all those who died. Scotland Yard has also opened a criminal investigation into the blaze. A building lobby group is demanding changes to this country's system for setting construction standards, which it warns is deeply flawed and puts the public at risk. Graham Burke of the Specialist Trade Contractors Federation says because standards are user pays, some standards are being completely lost unless someone can fund their development. He's written to the Building Minister Nick Smith and Commerce Minister Jackie Dean. The Transport Minister says people don't need to worry about attempts by his staff to block official information. New emails show KiwiRail caved into pressure from Simon Bridges' office to keep a report into a proposed Auckland railway line secret. A woman forced to live in a leaky bus as she recovered from surgery is now living in a whangarei motel, arranged by her MP, Kelvin Davis, and paid for by Work and Income. Maureen had a hip replacement 2 weeks ago and couldn't find an affordable flat in Whangarei. A suspicious parcel that sparked a bomb scare in central Dunedin has been destroyed by Defence Force bomb disposal experts. The package was found taped to a vacant building at lunchtime, and the surrounding buildings were evacuated and cordoned off. Mountain recreation groups say a proposed national park on high country land near Queenstown would give the land special protection and be beneficial for locals, tourists and the area's ecosystem. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. And Sharon Brett Kelly's here with Business Today. Hi, Sharon. There's been a strong rise in manufacturing activity.
That's right, Rowan. So the BNZ Business New Zealand Performance of Manufacturing Index, that's a monthly index, it rose to a 16-month high in May. That's up 1.6 points from April to 58.5. That's the highest value since January 2016. And it was strong across the board, so new orders, production stronger, but it was the employment sub-index that really stood out. It's risen to the highest level since October 2014, so more than 2.5 years. I spoke to the BNZ senior economist Doug Steele earlier today about it. He says that suggests that there's going to be more employment growth in the manufacturing sector through the middle of the year. He says overall that mild slowdown at the beginning of the year is just a distant memory, and it's really set up the sector to make a strong positive contribution to second quarter GDP growth.
And Sharon, it's been a good day for the A2 milk shares.
That's right. This is the specialty milk company, and its shares closed up more than 8% today, and that's after the company said that its full year forecast was going to rise by another $20 million to about $545 million. That's up more than 50% on the previous year. That's because of strong demand for A2's infant formula. And this is the second time in as many months that it's upgraded its forecast. In April, it said that demand had been particularly strong in Australia and through cross-border e-commerce sales into China. The company's sales were $388 million in the 9 months to March, and that's already ahead of the previous 12 months. So A2 Milk says it's working closely with the dairy producer Synlait. This is the South Island-based dairy producer to step up production for the rest of the year to obviously meet that demand. But it says it's trimmed back the planned extra spending on marketing into China.
And what's been happening on the markets today?
Well, the top 50 index closed up 36 points to 7552. The New Zealand dollar 72.06 US cents, 56.48 pence, and 95.01 Australian cents.
Thank you very much, Sharon. The Prison Guards Union is calling for their members to be armed with pepper spray and possibly tasers on the day 3 guards appeared in court charged with using excessive force against inmates. The charges stem from an attack inside the country's maximum security prison at Paremoremo last month, in which a guard was stabbed multiple times and a prisoner left with broken bones. The police were called in to investigate the incident at Auckland Prison. Tom Furley reports.
In the attack, 1 staff member and 3 prisoners were hurt. The prisoners' injuries enough to raise concerns over excessive force by the guards. 3 guards have been suspended. A 34-year-old and 26-year-old man face assault charges, while a third, who is 31, has been charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice by turning a CCTV camera away from the incident. They appeared in the North Shore District Court today, where they were granted name suppression for their own safety. The men have denied the charges and are due back in court at the end of this month. The head of the Corrections Association, Alan Whitley, says he understands the prisoner's injuries include a broken bone and head injuries. He says gangs were involved in the incident and tensions have been building at the prison over time.
Everybody is tense. They're wondering what's going on and they're having to be far more vigilant. So it's a risky place to be at the moment.
Alan Whitley says guards can only subdue prisoners with physical force. If they'd had pepper spray, he says the incident could have been stopped.
We've always got to be looking at what different safety devices are out there that can help us. That we've got to get away from the days where we go in there and physically wrestle with prisoners. We need to have tools that allow us to deal with prisoners that put some distance between us and the prisoner, because that's where the safety aspect comes into it. So we're keen to look at anything. We've mentioned that it might be timely to look at tasers at some point.
He says pepper spray will be in the prison in a few months. Mr Whitley says the guards would have been wearing body cameras. However, the president of the Sir Peter Williams QC Penal Reform League, Lady Henny Phillips-Williams, says more need to be made available to ensure the safety of staff and prisoners.
We can't have guards going around using fists and pepper spray and tasers willy-nilly and using the rule of the jungle instead of the rule of law in prisons. It's got to be looked at very seriously before anything else.
A researcher at Victoria University's Institute of Criminology, Kim Workman, says the fact guards are facing charges is a very serious matter and should be a concern for the Corrections Minister. He says the last review into prison safety assumed violence was only carried out by prisoners and ignored the risk from staff.
If the safety review had taken a broader approach and had looked at, developing a safety strategy that prevented violence from occurring, whether it was from prisoners or from staff, we may not have had this incident at all.
Dr Workman says tasers and pepper spray aren't the answer. Ahead of today's court appearance, the director of Auckland Prison, Alan Langley, said in a written statement a full operational review was underway into the incident, as well as a Corrections Inspectorate report.
Corrections has a zero tolerance to violence policy. No assault or violent behaviour by a prisoner or a staff member is acceptable. Anyone who takes part in this kind of behaviour can expect to be prosecuted.
Corrections declined to answer questions from RNZ News, saying the matter is now before the courts. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
The father of an American college student who was released from North Korea says his son was brutalised and terrorised by the regime. 22-year-old Otto Warmbier was held in North Korea for 17 months after being found guilty of hostile acts against the state for reportedly trying to steal a propaganda plaque while visiting the country. His family found out he'd been in a coma for more than a year. He was medevaced out of North Korea this week and doctors have now confirmed he has a severe neurological injury. The BBC's Sarah Corker reports.
Otto Warmbier, a 22-year-old American student sentenced to 15 years hard labour for stealing a propaganda sign from a hotel. He's now in a coma. North Korea says shortly after the trial he contracted botulism, a rare illness that causes paralysis. But Otto's father strongly refutes that.
Even if you believe their explanation of botulism and a sleeping pill causing the coma, and we don't, there is no excuse for any civilized nation to have kept his condition secret and denied him top-notch medical care for so long.
Otto had visited North Korea as part of a group tour. He arrived back in the United States on Tuesday, and doctors treating him in Cincinnati say they've found no signs of botulism.
His neurological condition can be best described as a state of unresponsive wakefulness. He has spontaneous eye opening and blinking. However, he shows no signs of understanding language.
It comes as tensions between the United States and North Korea are mounting over Pyongyang's nuclear and missile programs. The US diplomat who negotiated Otto's release also met this week with 3 other US citizens being detained by the authoritarian regime.
I call on them to release the other Americans being held. No other family should have to endure what the Warmbiers have.
Doctors say Otto suffered extensive loss of brain tissue, and his family described it as a bittersweet feeling to finally have him home.
Sarah Corker reporting. Well, finally, after 24 years, Hundertwasser is go in Whangarei. That's how long it's been since the revered Austrian artist sat down at the town basin, eyed up the old harbour board building and sketched a design to transform it. And today, at last, the funding's in place to build his dream. Here's Lois Williams.
It's not often a politician gets 3 cheers in the north, but Maggie Barry, Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage, brought glad tidings of great joy to a jubilant crowd this morning at Whangarei's waterfront. The last $3 million needed to build the Hundertwasser Arts Centre and Wairau Māori Art Gallery is now in the bag.
We are just thrilled and delighted to be able to help. I know that Frederick Hundertwasser said even small things can bring beauty into our life. Beauty is always underestimated, but not here, not today, not for this project.
For the last 2 years, a group of dedicated volunteers, the Prosper Northland Trust, has been moving heaven and earth to raise $21 million. They took on the Hundertwasser project in 2015 when it proved too hot a political potato for the council, and they had until the end of this month to find the money. The strain of the last few weeks was showing as the deadline approached, and there were tears of relief on many faces this morning. Andrew Garrett's the project manager.
We have a thing in our team just lately, who's on the tier roster, and I'm getting close. So all the volunteers in the community that have come together over the last month, just been phenomenal. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Barry and Shane. He's just done an amazing job for us. Thank you.
All up, the Crown's contributed $11.5 million to the Hundertwasser Centre, if you count the lottery's grant this week of $3.5 million. The Hundertwasser Foundation's New Zealand rep, Richard Smart, who helped the artist build the famous Kawakawa toilets, says the Whangarei project was always going to need government backing, and he says it'll be worth every dollar.
I think it's justified, to have that sort of support nationally, because this is going to be a national icon. So it's bigger than just Whangarei, it's bigger than just Northland, and that's what the Foundation's been saying from the start.
Whangarei's MP, Shane Reti, says the Hundertwasser Centre will be a game changer for the city. He says it'll now be a port of call for the big cruise ships that have always sailed on past.
Cruise Ship New Zealand just last month said, you build it and we will stop. And if Northport can receive us, we will stop. We're very enthusiastic to receive international cruise ships. So this is just a trigger factor, which is exactly what government hoped. This would be a trigger factor for other big economic development in Northland, all of Northland.
Prosper Northland says all going well, work will start on the Hundertwasser Centre before Christmas. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
An Edgecombe resident forced to sell his home to the Bay of Plenty Council is worried he won't be able to afford a new house. 12 Edgecombe homeowners are being forced to sell their properties to make way for a new stop bank. Eva Corlett reports.
For 30 years, Reuben Cohen has owned his home on College Road, near where the Rangataiki River stop bank breached. On the 6th of April, he and his wife, both pensioners, were turfed out by the flooding and their home was red-stickered. After months of being homeless, Mr. Cohen is tired and stressed.
Your life stops being your own. You don't make plans. Other people make plans for you. There are processes that occur, and you have to go along with these particular processes. You can't really plan your day. You're waiting on a phone call, then you react. You're waiting on a message, email or something, and then you react again.
The council will buy the land in order to put a new stop bank along the river banks. It says the 12 properties affected are already uninhabitable. The Public Works Act permits the forced sale of land and says that the price offered can't put the owner in a better or worse off position. Mr. Cohen says that could be a problem when it comes to the value of Edgecombe property.
We're living in a town that has cheaper housing than other places, so the chances of us moving somewhere else means we move into a more expensive place. We move into a more expensive place, then suddenly we have to take on a mortgage, which of course we took 30 years to pay off, and we did. So the Act really just does it on the basis of financial circumstances, whereas we feel that being neither better nor worse off means that we should be able to have the sort of mindset which we had before, and that is not guaranteed.
Mr Cohen says there are costs associated with the forced sales that go beyond the financial.
Making that particular place home, the sentimental things that have to be left behind. There's grief in the whole thing as well.
Mr Cohen says price offers between the homeowners and council are ongoing. He says the negotiations are a delicate process and flooding victims need to be looked after.
It's one thing to have a very large weather event. It's another thing to have the disaster that followed it. And some people, myself included, believe it was avoidable.
The Bay of Plenty Regional Council has started testing the ground to decide where to put the new stop bank. Council's Mark Townsend says a new stop bank is his priority.
At the moment we've got a temporary stop bank in place, and we're not guaranteeing that up to the 1% AEP, so that if we, for instance, did get a reasonable flood prediction for coming down the river, then we'd be in an evacuation situation for Edgecombe.
Mr Townsend says the offers are fairly generous because of the disruption caused to property owners.
There's certainly many that are keen, and there's others who are less keen. So that's obviously part of the sensitive discussions that we're having with each property owner.
Mr Townsend could not say how many people had accepted the council offer. The project is due to be completed next May. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Eva Colette tēnei.
Team New Zealand's upbeat about its chances a day out from the America's Cup rematch against its old foe Oracle, Team USA. Both teams have been out testing and sailing on Bermuda's Great Sound before they meet for the first time on Sunday morning in the first to 7 points contest. Our America's Cup reporter Todd Nile is in Bermuda.
The so-called favourite wing is repaired and tested yesterday. Today there's nothing dramatic about what's going on, according to the team's operations manager Kevin Shoebridge.
Really, it's fine-tuning at the moment, so we're going out sailing for the next couple of hours, and we've just got a few little things that we want to try and tighten up on, but it's really incremental detail now as opposed to broad brush stuff. The time for that's probably gone. You don't have a lot of time left to get familiar with your equipment, so you want to have that sort of race equipment on board now and just learn how to use it.
What are Oracle up to?
Oracle are out sailing today. They weren't yesterday, but they're out sailing today, and I think they'll be doing exactly the same thing.
Team New Zealand's been out sailing every day since its Challenger final win over Artemis, and Shoebridge says it's the small things that matter now.
I think the biggest gains on the table now are actually, sailing well, sailing the boat well, learning the equipment that you have. Because right through this whole Challenger series we were sailing with new equipment and never really got a big opportunity to test or develop what we had. And that's what we're focusing on now, is trying to make the most of what we have, and I think there's still some pretty big gains to be had by doing that.
Team New Zealand starts 1 point behind and needs 8 wins before Oracle gets 7, with the defender getting a bonus point for winning the opening round's racing. The defending skipper Jimmy Spithill says that could make the difference.
Look, I tell you what, I'd much rather have it than not have it going into this cup. We've seen how close this racing's been out there, and who knows, we could come back and look at this bonus point as a real defining moment.
But Spithill's also famous for playing mind games with his public utterances, something that Team New Zealand cyclist Andy Maloney says doesn't rattle them.
To be honest, we sort of almost laugh at him in the press conferences. We think he's a bit of a joker and he puts on a sort of a tough face, but in real life when you meet him outside of competition, that's not actually really who he is, it's more his personality he puts on in front of the cameras. So yeah, we don't take it to heart at all, and we just think it's pretty funny.
The talking stops on Sunday morning with 2 races on each of 2 days before a 5-day break in the competition. In Bermuda, mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Todd Nile tēnei.
When Labour MP Claire Curran landed in Dunedin last night, the police were waiting for her. Kevin, a taxi driver who's been driving Miss Curran to and from the airport ever since she became an MP 10 years ago, was en route to collect her when the police had to take over. We'll start by picturing Kevin hurtling down State Highway 1.
It just started to turn to a torrential downpour and gale force winds on the motorway heading out down south, and it would be about just before 5 o'clock, and the traffic was pretty thick, and I was following a contractor's truck in the fast lane, probably doing about 90 to 100, and he swerved just before we're halfway along the State Highway 1. He swerved, and I got a hell of a fright, but I had nowhere to go, and he was dodging a wool bale, half-full wool bale that had fallen off a truck and it was in the middle of the highway, and of course I ploughed straight into it, and anyway, he pulled over to the side and stopped the traffic, and he dragged the wool bale off the road to the side of the road, and I pulled over to the side and just parked up. It was raining quite heavy, and the next thing, there was about 2 or 3 police cars there, and they just, kept the traffic going, and one was in front of my car, and I saw this big pool that looked like oil, and I thought I'd better not travel any further, so I rang up a breakdown truck to come and pick the car up, but in the meantime the police had located the truck that the bale had fallen off further up the road and brought the driver back, and actually his boss rang me up this morning and apologised for it. I think it was just an accident. It was, anyway, I had to pick Claire Curran up at the airport. By this time it was about 5:15, and I couldn't get through to her because she'd be still on the plane. So anyway, I told the police, there was a lady there, her name was Kate Goodman, her name was. She was a police lady, and I was sitting in her car giving her all the details. And anyway, she said, "Oh, well, we better go and pick her up." And I said, "Are you going?" She said, "Yeah, we'll go and pick her up." So Claire was waiting at the airport, and she got a hell of a surprise when a police car pulled up to take her back to the van. So we got her in the front, and I sat in the back, and we got her home, and the tow truck took my car into town, and I've arranged with the insurance today to get it repaired. So.
And how much did the police officer charge for the fare?
No, I'm just going to go down and shout for her.
Do you think that you could have created a bit of a local scandal there with the local MP being greeted at the airport by police, ushered into a police car?
I suppose that could happen. No, the car that we picked, there was 2 police car, a wagon and a car, but this one that went out there was a mufti one.
Okay, and so you have been Claire Curran's driver for a number of years. You obviously you're taking the job pretty...
Since the day she started, I've actually been a staunch Labor person, and I know I used to take to Puraku Horomia, and Trevor Mallard's daughter played rugby down there, and I knew her well, and she just lived round the corner from me, and Trevor used to come down a hell of a lot. And I know Annette, Annette's a good friend of mine, Annette King. Take Jacinda at Hearns, and she started there, and quite a lot of them I take from up there.
Kevin, do you ever take anyone from the other side, take any national MPs in your taxi?
No. Years ago I took Catherine Rich a few times, that's in foodstuffs. One of those, she's in the grocery business now, Catherine Rich.
Have you ever had another incident like this before in your career?
Yeah, well, one morning Claire was on the red eye, and it was a winter's morning, black as, about 6:15 in the morning, and I dropped her off at the airport, and I was coming back up the Centre Road. There's all dairy farms up there, just before you get to Ellington. And anyway, a cow jumped through my windscreen and flattened the car and just about killed me. And there was ambulances and fire brigades and everything there with that incident. So there's a photo of that that previous car, it was just a write-off, it was flattened. The cow went right over the roof and landed at the back of the car. I was lucky to get out of that one. So that's all happened. I've been picking her up on that red eye since she started in Parliament now. It's quite a few years.
And when do you think you'll be back on the road? When's your car going to get fixed?
No, the car's not bad. It just needs a new bumper. To stuff my bumper up, I've got to get a new bumper.
It's Claire Curran's taxi driver, Kevin. RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Corrections Union says if prison guards had pepper spray, they wouldn't have to physically subdue prisoners. 3 prisoners face charges after a guard was attacked and stabbed multiple times last month. 3 guards also face allegations of excessive force while stepping in, with 2 appearing in court today on charges of assault and a 3rd facing a charge of attempting to pervert the course of justice by turning a CCTV camera away. They denied the charges in the North Shore District Court and were granted name suppression for their own safety. The head of the Corrections Association, Alan Whitley, says staff only have physical force to subdue prisoners.
If we had pepper spray in a situation like that, the responding staff would have sprayed those prisoners. We wouldn't have been getting hands on them. No one would have been trying to physically control those prisoners because they would have been covered in pepper spray. And we think that would have stopped it. But we don't have that in that prison, and we're not going to have it in that prison for another 2 months.
The Corrections Association, Alan Whitley. Londoners are planning a rally in Westminster to call for justice for those caught up in the Grenfell Tower inferno. At least 17 people died as flames tore through the 24-storey building in West London in the early morning, with dozens more thought to be missing. There were angry scenes in North Kensington today as the London Mayor Sadiq Khan was heckled by crowds and the Prime Minister Theresa May was criticised for visiting the site without meeting members of the community. A construction pressure group is calling on the government to fix this country's system for setting building standards, which it says is in crisis. Graham Burke, the president of the Specialist Trade Contractors Federation, has written to ministers demanding an urgent change. He says the user pays system means some standards are being lost entirely or slanted in favour of those who can afford to fund them.
A private funder would generally be a supplier or a manufacturer. As soon as you get a person with an interested party actually funding that standard, funding might not last if they don't get a favourable result. It's definitely a conflict of interest.
Graham Burke of the Specialist Trade Contractors Federation. Some district health boards will have to return money to the Ministry of Health after a budget funding blunder resulted in $38 million being wrongly allocated. The Director General of Health, Chai Chua, has apologised for an error in allocated funding in this year's budget. That meant some district health boards got less money than they expected and others more. Independent auditors Deloitte now have been brought in to establish how it happened. The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, says such a mistake is unacceptable. The Transport Minister says the public should not be concerned about attempts by his staff to block official information. New emails show KiwiRail caved to pressure from Simon Bridges' office to keep a report into a proposed Auckland rail line secret, despite initially insisting the document legally had to be made public. Mr Bridges says he was only made aware of what his office was doing when the email trail was inadvertently sent to New Zealand First. But he says his staff were in the right based on very clear ways of doing things for a very long time in practice and convention and on respectable legal grounds as well. Following 2 weeks of publicity, KiwiRail published the report online yesterday, but with many parts redacted. An Edgecombe homeowner is being forced to sell his land to the regional council, says the offer must compensate them beyond the value of their homes. The council is buying 12 red-stickered properties in the Bay of Plenty town to make way for a new stock bank. A College Road homeowner of 30 years, Reuben Cohen, says the negotiations are a delicate process and flooding victims need to be looked after. Mr Cohen says buying another home outside the town will be difficult.
We're living in a town that has cheaper housing than other places. So the chances of us moving somewhere else means we move into a more expensive place. We move into a more expensive place, then suddenly we have to take on a mortgage, which of course we took 30 years to pay off.
Reuben Cohen says losing a home with sentimental value is a cost that cannot be financially remedied.
The building of the long-awaited Hundertwasser Art Centre in Whangarei is being described as a game-changer for the whole region. The Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, Maggie Barry, announced a grant of $3 million for the project today, the amount needed to reach the fundraising target. The Northland Regional Council Chair, Bill Shepherd, says the Hundertwasser Centre will put Whangarei and Northland on the global tourism map at last.
I'm just over the moon that the central government has got behind the community and just provided us with that huge amount of support, and it's just it's a real red letter day for Whangarei and for Northland.
Bill Shepherd, the government's put $7 million into the Hundertwasser project and was influential in securing a $3.5 million lotteries grant for the project this week. The Northland Regional Council has contributed $1.5 million from its investment fund. The bomb squad has exploded a suspicious package left on a building ledge in central Dunedin. The Defence Force arrived from Christchurch this afternoon and a bomb disposal robot was used to explode the package shortly after 5 o'clock. Inspector Jason Guthrie says the small foil-covered package and an attached note were discovered by a member of the public taped to a building on Moray Place in the central city about lunchtime. About 5 buildings and a Countdown supermarket were evacuated as a precaution, and a 100-metre radius cordon was set up around the scene. The cordon remains in place while the police wrap up the operation. It's 6:06. To sport, and the All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says while they're getting their side up to speed for the first Lions test, they're also showing Samoa the respect they deserve at Eden Park tonight. With the exception of captain Kieran Reid, Hansen named his best side for tonight. Hansen says with a win for them, they won't just be on the scoreboard, but also getting some combinations going.
You bring in a group of people that come from different teams and playing different defensive patterns, for example, different attack structures. So if we can get through the game, starting to get those connections going again, getting back into the All Black way and play with a bit of intensity and pace with some accuracy will be good.
Steve Hansen, and in the early game at Eden Park, Wales lead Tonga 8-3 midway through the first half. Defender Michael Boxall says the All Whites aren't daunted by their underdog status heading into the opening game of the Confederation Cup in Russia on Sunday morning. New Zealand is the lowest ranked team at the tournament and has failed to score in both of its warm-up matches against Belarus and Northern Ireland. But Boxall says they won't be overawed, stepping up against the host nation in St Petersburg.
As a team, our track record from our performances, at least in the last 2 to 3 years, we've actually played a lot better when we have to step up against the big teams on bigger stages.
All Whites defender Michael Boxall. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Warren Brookbanks is reimagining law as a healing profession. Alan Lichtman says it doesn't take much imagination to see President Trump impeached. Anthony Grant's tribute to imagination is a 25-acre sculpturium, and Holly Walker imagined she could have it all. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel, Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui and Taupo. Cloudy periods and a few showers clearing from Auckland southwards tonight. Areas of morning fog tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, also Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington. Mostly fine. Areas of morning cloud or fog tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, a few showers mainly near the coast. Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, cloudy areas today, fine tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, fine spells, isolated showers about the coast today. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mainly fine, but a few showers about Fiordland and the south coast and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Well, specialist forensic teams are now working inside London's burnt-out Grenfell Tower as police warn it could take weeks to identify all the victims. Entire families are missing after the blaze, which engulfed the 24-storey building 2 days ago, and Prime Minister Theresa May has ordered a full public inquiry. The confirmed death toll stands at 17, but the final number could move into triple figures. And mixed with the grief is now a growing anger in the local community that warnings about the safety of the building were ignored by authorities. The BBC's Mark Easton compiled this report.
Slowly, inch by painstaking inch, fire officers continue their grim and dangerous work.
amid the soot-blackened shell of what was once home to hundreds, are some who didn't make it out. Exactly how many we don't know, but police today said they hoped the final death toll would not be in 3 figures. The scale of this tragedy is yet to become clear.
Sadly, I can confirm that the number of people that have died is now 17. We do believe that that number will sadly increase. There are 37 people receiving treatment, of which 17 are still in critical care.
The brother of these 2 Syrians was one of those who lost his life. Mohammed al-Hajali was an engineering student seeking a better life in Britain. Omar was with him as firemen tried to evacuate the blazing building, but the pair got separated.
And I looked behind me, I didn't see my brother. I said, my brother, where is he? They were ignoring downstairs. Then I went outside. I called him, he said, where are you? He said, I'm in the flat. I said, why you didn't come? They brought us outside. I thought you are with us. He said, no one brought me outside.
Relatives of 5-year-old Isaac Paulos confirmed today that the little boy was among those who died in the fire. The agony of a wounded neighbourhood is written on a wall, the desperation of people searching for family and friends, prayers and solace from near and far. For the last 2 days, Jason Garcia's been searching for his 12-year-old cousin, Jessica Urbano.
We feel helpless, really. All we're hoping is that through putting up posters, sharing her image on social media and talking to people like yourself, that maybe someone with information will get in touch with us.
Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come.
This evening, Jessica's parents and friends gathered together in a community that is craving answers but complains of delays and evasion.
At the moment we're grieving, but there's a bubbling anger underneath, and we do want to see someone held accountable for this.
The love and generosity that's poured into North Kensington in the last couple of days cannot make up for the numbing sense of loss. The Prime Minister made a private visit to the scene today, speaking to emergency workers before announcing there will be a full public inquiry into what went wrong.
When I spoke to the emergency services, they told me that this fire, the way this fire progressed, how it took hold of this building, was rapid, it was ferocious, and it was unexpected.
Shock and grief are being joined by outrage and anger. The questions are raining down, rather like the charred lumps of cladding, which locals are holding up as possible evidence that people were housed in a preventable death trap. London Mayor Sadiq Khan was heckled by a small group of people on a visit to Grenfell Tower today.
Tell me what he's going to say. I don't want to hear this rubbish.
Feelings are running high.
Understandably, the residents are very angry and concerned and have genuine questions that demand answers. And so, whereas
someone needs to be held accountable.
Well, of course, we want.
Deaths could have been prevented.
The concerns are not just about what went wrong in North Kensington. They're also about what could go wrong in thousands of tower blocks across Britain. Residents at Trellick Tower, who can see Grenfell Tower from their balconies, now have a constant and disturbing reminder of the risks of high-rise living.
Mark Easton with that report. And a temporary workers' village set up in Kaikoura to accommodate more than 300 workers fixing State Highway 1 and the railway corridor between Christchurch and Picton is nearing completion. The North Canterbury Alliance, which includes the Transport Agency and Kiwi Rail, has been contracted to repair the road and rail corridor damaged in the Kaikoura earthquake, with both expected to be reopened by the end of the year. To get the work done, the Alliance has brought a temporary workers' village comprised of 75 prefabricated units to Kaikoura. Our reporter Maya Burry was at the village with the live view earlier today.
So I'm standing on the corner of Ludstone and Mount Fife Road. This is just west of the city centre in Kaikoura. And for people that are watching behind me, you'll see a number of prefabricated units here and a bit of a construction zone as well. This work, getting the workers' village together, is still underway. But there are 200 workers already staying in these 75 units. Each have about 4 bedrooms and an ensuite. There's also other facilities here, such as a dining room and a gym. So as you can see, work's still underway, but the majority of the 300 workers who are going to be staying here are already getting settled in.
And why did the Alliance set up this scheme, Maya?
Well, they say that this temporary village is essential to meeting their end-of-year deadline to get the road and rail corridor reopened. They say they need to have the workers close to the work sites, essentially, and it's likely that this village will be open past that end-of-year deadline. There will still be a lot of work going on once the road and rail corridor has been reopened. It's likely State Highway 1 North will be, down to one lane in some parts because, these workers will still be trying to get this road back to normal, I guess.
And how is progress going on that deadline to have the road open by the end of the year?
They say they're progressing on track. They obviously understand that for Kaikoura, the road north is such an important lifeline in terms of tourism and trade for this area. So they say that they're still hoping to have that work done by the end of this year. But as we all know, a lot of work still needs to be done to clear a number of large slips that, at the moment, making this road inaccessible.
That was our reporter Maya Burry there in Kaikoura. Well, 3 international rugby fixtures are taking place across the country tonight. The first is already underway. Tonga are playing Wales at Eden Park. And that'll be followed by the All Blacks versus Samoa. It'll be the All Blacks' first game of the year before next week's British and Irish Lions series starts. And speaking of the Lions, they play the Māori All Blacks in Rotorua tomorrow night. Our sports reporter Matt Chatterton's at Eden Park for tonight's double header. Hi, Matt. How's
Hi,
that
Rowan,
Tonga?
how are you?
Good. How's that Tonga Wales game going?
Yeah, it's been good so far. There have been a couple of disallowed tries too of Wales out on their right wing. They've had a couple of cracks now, but Tonga have been able to hold off the Welsh attack so far. From what I last saw, I then jumped in a taxi to get here, so I haven't actually got a score update for you, unfortunately, but it is a thriller of a game so far from what I've seen.
And what about the All Blacks, Matt? What can we expect from them tonight?
Well, it's the All Blacks' first game of the year, of course, so it's a chance, I guess, to dust off the cobwebs. I know we hear that cliche quite a bit when it's their first game of the season, but given how important it is with next week's Lions series starting, it really is that for them. We've got Sonny Bill Williams and Anton Leonard-Brown in the midfield for the first time, so they really want to get some good combinations going between those two. Young Geordie Barrett, the youngest of the 3 Barrett All Black brothers, is on the bench, and if he makes onto the field, he will debut along with the Hurricanes utility forward, shall we say, via Fafita. He is on the bench as loose forward cover. Jerome Kaino is coming back for the All Blacks tonight, so be a good chance to hit out against his place of birth, Samoa.
And Matt, how likely do you think it is that we'll see those 3 Barrett brothers on the field together?
Yeah, there is actually a very good chance of that happening, Rowan. Scott Barrett is also on the bench alongside Geordie. He will likely come on as a lock replacement for either Sam Whitelock or Brodie Retallick, and then of course Geordie is there to cover pretty much the entire back line. He could fit in anywhere from the midfield right up to the outside backs on the wing or at fullback, and of course Beauden Barrett will be playing there at first 5. So no, it's sure to see all 3 out there at some point.
Thanks very much, Matt, and enjoy the game tonight. That's our reporter Matt Chatterton at Eden Park. There are renewed fears that not nearly enough pilots are being trained in New Zealand, and that's confirmed by official figures showing a fall-off in pilots' licences issued in the past 7 years. The shortage is also a problem overseas, and as Eric Frickberg reports, it's unlikely to be resolved soon.
Official statistics show the number of new commercial and air transport pilots' licences fell from 709 in 2009 to 386 in 2016. The president of the Airline Pilots Association, Tim Robinson, says supply isn't coming close to meeting demand for pilots.
We don't believe, bottom line, that enough New Zealand pilots are being trained in the industry right here now in New Zealand to keep up with the growth and predicted growth of the industry.
Captain Robinson says too few pilots are being trained, and many of those who are trained go overseas. Rob George of the Aero Club's organisation, Flying New Zealand, says young pilots have a difficult time even when they do finish studying.
You could be talking a
2-year course with a 6-figure student loan, and you're probably employable at not too far off the minimum wage as a very inexperienced low-hours instructor.
Rob George says this is the only realistic way for many pilots to get the flying hours anywhere near the 1,500 required to apply for even the lowest level flying job at Air New Zealand. With challenges like this, Rob George says many people are deterred from an aviation career in the first place, and those who do train often won't stay in New Zealand at all.
Entry-level jobs are quite difficult often for people to get into, unless they go offshore to somewhere like Papua New Guinea or the islands or whatever to build that hours and experience.
The government pays some money to trainee pilots, but it falls around $30,000 a year short for most students. The government also caps the total number of students at a fixed level. Captain Robinson thinks that cap must increase, and there's more.
We'd also like to see more industry investment in the pilot training aspect of the industry, because they are, of course, the major beneficiaries of an efficient training system. At the moment, there's no real investment from the airlines in pilot training itself.
Captain Robinson says a fully trained pilot in charge of an aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars is a very valuable asset, and airlines should pay more towards the training costs. Pilot shortage isn't just a local problem. A study by the University of North Dakota forecast a global shortage of 15,000 pilots by 2026. John Nicholson of the industry body Aviation New Zealand says this country must move fast to meet this challenge domestically.
The market is growing, both in New Zealand and internationally, and there are good opportunities for pilots in the short, medium and long term.
Air New Zealand says it's got no issues with attracting pilots, but the company tried 4 years ago to put pilots on a government list for approved migration, but was turned down by Immigration New Zealand. For Checkpoint, Eric Frickberg.
From next month, gun owners in Australia will be able to hand in unregistered firearms without the fear of prosecution. The amnesty will last for 3 months and is aimed at getting weapons off the streets amid the ongoing threat of terrorism. It'll be the first nationwide gun amnesty since the Port Arthur massacre in 1996. The ABC's Eliza Borrello reports.
The Justice Minister, Michael Keenan, only announced the amnesty this morning, but already gun owners like ABC Radio Sydney talkback caller Chris say they'll be taking it up.
It's a good way of getting the grandfather guns out of the community.
He says he'll be handing in an illegal firearm he forgot about during the 1996 amnesty.
And another one is just a barrel that needs to be handed in. I've got a number of other guns that are fully legal.
Mr Keenan says intelligence suggests there are about 260,000 illicit guns in the Australian community.
Clearly, the fact that we've got a deteriorating national security environment, we've got an environment where there has been 5 terror attacks on our soil, and sadly, in the vast majority of those cases, it has been an illegal firearm that's been used. Clearly, that makes this top of mind, and why we want to make sure that we can clear as many illegal firearms from the community as possible.
He says often people find themselves with an unregistered gun after the death of an elderly family member.
And the family just doesn't know what to do with it. So we want to give people an opportunity to hand in their guns, no questions asked, no repercussions.
On his morning walk, John Howard, the Prime Minister who announced the 1996 amnesty, told Channel 9 a second one had his full support.
It certainly worked way back then. We took probably 700,000-800,000 weapons out of circulation. It was an overwhelming success. Now, I'm not saying conditions are exactly the same, but the important thing is that there's a reason to do it, there's a safety reason to do it.
Bevan Steele owns a gun shop in Narrogin in Western Australia's wheat belt. He's also the president of the WA Firearm Traders Association and thinks advertising a national amnesty is a great move.
It's one of those things that a lot of gun owners are stuck with, especially ageing gun owners. You know, what do they do with their guns? Do they hand them in? How do they go about it? So it makes it easy for them now.
Mr Keenan says he's confident the initiative will be a success.
This is the first national amnesty that we've had in 20 years, but on a state basis have been very successful. For example, the last amnesty they had in Queensland saw 13,000 extra guns registered and 6,000 guns destroyed. So we know that this is an approach that works.
Crossbench Senator Nick Xenophon has applauded the government.
If this will mean fewer guns on the streets, if this gives an opportunity for people to get those guns off the streets and into the hands of authorities so that they can't do any harm, then that's a good thing.
The Australian Senator Nick Xenophon ending that report from Eliza Borrello in Canberra. Well, finally tonight, 4 years after taking the world by storm, Lorde has released her second album to widespread acclaim. Alex Bean from RNZ's Music 101 says the album is remarkable.
This was the first taste we were given of Lorde's second album, Melodrama, back in March. Slickly produced by Jack Antonoff, Green Light seemed like a new sound for Lorde. Compared to the minimalism of her debut Pure Heroine, Green Light is positively bombastic with its frenetic keyboards and over-the-top happy major chord changes. It seemed as though we may be looking at a Lorde who for the first time was deliberately aiming herself at the mainstream. It felt like an attempt to write a hit radio song. But now with the context of the whole album, Green Light is clearly a deliberate scene setter. Yes, this is a breakup album. And yes, this is a maturing Lorde.
Bodies all through my house. I know the story by heart. Jack and Jill get up and possessive when they get dark. But my hips are missed your hips, so let's get to know the kicks. Will you sway with me? Go astray with me.
The subject matter is different from Pure Heroine, but the hyper-awareness and sharp lyrical barbs are still there. Melodrama is single Lorde, hosting parties and dallying in romantic trysts, drinking and at least alluding to taking drugs. So far so normal for any 20-year-old woman, but even as she is indulging, Lorde's analytical mind seems incapable of completely letting go. The rush I feel at the beginning, I get caught up just for a minute. It's a beautiful lyric, and typically Lorde. And then the song descends into somewhat of an anti-chorus. Melodrama certainly isn't aimed at radio, nor strictly at the dance floor, but it's aimed at Lorde's fans. The highs, the lows, they'll be able to enjoy them in the car, in their bedroom, on headphones, and particularly in a live setting. The extensive touring that followed Pure Heroine has certainly honed Lorde's ability to create a danceable anthem. But the album certainly isn't wall-to-wall bangers. She's exploring here, pushing herself as a songwriter. And without doubt, some of the album's most powerful moments are with the more intimate songs.
Now she's gonna play and sing and lock you in her heart. Bet you rue the day you kissed a rider in the dark. I am my mother's child. I love you till my breathing stops. I love you till you call the cops on me.
That is Writer in the Dark, perhaps the anchor point of the album, and certainly one of the best things she's written. And this is a salient point. She wrote this. Yes, as with her last album, she had a co-writer, but there can no longer be any doubt as to the level of Lorde's talent as a songwriter. Already, the album is being lavished with praise from her fans around the world, who describe it as a cohesive work, something very rarely associated with pop albums. Most pop albums are created by committee, but you can hear Lorde's attention to detail across every facet of this record. You can hear how much work has gone into refining it.
All the glamour and the drama and fucking melodrama. Whoa, whoa. All the gunfights in the limelight in the holy sick divine nights. Whoa. Don't talk about us, all the lovers, how we kiss and kill each other. Whoa.
She's not endorsing our melodrama, she's rejecting it. 3 months is a long time to build up to an album by today's standards, and releasing 4 songs before the album came out was also a risk because listeners may feel they already know the record. But Melodrama is designed to be consumed in its entirety and is a complete artistic expression, worthy of one of Aotearoa's best songwriters, and we hope her best is still to come. For Checkpoint, ko Alex B. and Tēnei.
And finally tonight, a bit of text feedback from 2101. What a great Checkpoint tonight. Great storytelling, superb show. You know what time it is. Well, thanks John Campbell, and he will be back on Monday. In the meantime, I'm Rowan Quinn. Have a lovely weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Corrections Union says guards at Auckland Prison should have been able to use pepper spray to control prisoners who attacked a guard last month. 3 guards are facing charges, including using excessive force. A rally will be held in London to call for justice for the victims of the Grenfell Tower inferno, in which at least 17 people died. A construction pressure group is calling on the government to fix this country's user pay system for setting building standards, which it says is in crisis. Auditor Deloitte is investigating how $38 million of Health Ministry funding was wrongly allocated in this year's budget. And an Edgecombe homeowner who's had to sell his land to make way for a stop bank says residents must be compensated beyond the value of their homes. Our next news and weather is at 7.
To go out on the trishaw and have them talk about what they did when they were younger, how